Look at you guys over there. Alright, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Alright, okay. It's like a big, loud room, so I'm going to be talking a lot. Usually a little bit more volume, just a little tad more. Alright, that sounds better. Alright guys, so welcome to Evangelion Deconstructed. My name is Aaron Clark. You may know me. I got some fans back there or something. This is weird. Maybe you know me online. I'm the Ava Monkey. You guys are freaking me out over there. Okay. So I hail from avamonkey.com and also avageeks.org. Yeah! There's a few of our forum members here. Probably this guy. Which one are you?
I shouted AI.
You shouted AI.
I shouted.
You guys are awesome. Okay, real quick plug, Ava Geeks. If you're ever bored that none of your friends like Evangelion and you just want people to hang out with and, you know, talk about Ava, good place. Active newsfeed, active forums, active wiki. The wiki has so much cool stuff on it. It's amazing. But at any rate, here's what you're here for. And I apologize if maybe the description wasn't quite what you might be expecting. It makes sense to me, but it might not make total sense. But here's what you're here for. Neo-Genesis Evangelion, its mysteries have been put under a microscope more than almost any other anime. While many questions have been left unanswered, many facets of the creation have been documented in detail. This panel will present a broad survey of what went into creating Evangelion. Now what I mean by that is, Evangelion is a show that confuses people. This is a pretty established fact. Nobody understands the show at a completely comprehensive level. And it drives some people to do a lot of research. Now, the problem with this is that it doesn't always lead to understanding certain things in the show. However, you can learn a lot of things about the creative process of the show. A lot of the references, influences, homages, even little things like animation that were pulled from other shows can be kind of uncovered in the process of trying to figure out, you know, who shot Ryoji Kaji. Things like that. So, this panel may include some spoilers. This is not an introductory panel by any means. And if you're here because you're not very familiar with the show, you're not really going to know what we're talking about. Another disclaimer is that this panel is a work in progress. I kind of got a weird bait and switch when I had this set up. I was going to be doing another panel, an 18+ panel, about a lot of the ridiculous stuff in the fandom and a lot of the ridiculous stuff in the official universe. But I don't think they can hold 18+ panels in this room. So it had to be changed. So when I sat down to put this thing together, it became this very weird, daunting task. But here's the really satirical look at what I'm trying to do here. VF4, from Mecha Designs, Ultraman, Human-like look, Barney, kick-ass colors equals Evangelion. I'm going to go through, I'm going to show you a bunch of very random stuff. A lot of things that may be subjective as to where they came from, but a lot of these things are pretty concrete references. There's not a whole lot that can be really argued. In which case, some of this stuff might be common knowledge. So, hopefully this won't be too redundant. But here's kind of like the underlying quotation that I'm kind of pulling from. This is a quotation from Hideaki Anno. This was published in the very first volume of the Evangelion manga, before the show had even aired. I borrowed from everywhere. Even names that have no bearing on anything actually come from the countless rules that govern these things. It might be fun if someone with free time could research them. Now, when you sit down and actually try to make a panel that puts all these things into it, bad idea. There's a lot of stuff. I have like 130 slides in this presentation, and I feel like I've only put like maybe a third of what should be in this panel. This is the man himself. This is Evangelion.
You troll!
He's not that old. He's only like 40. This is another great quotation by him. This is also from the same letter that he wrote before the show aired. I tried to include everything of myself in Neon Genesis Evangelion. Myself, a broken man who could do nothing for 4 years. He's speaking specifically of the time when Gainax was not producing any animation. They formed in the late 80s to produce a film called The Royal Space Force, also known as The Wings of Oniamis. And they had critical success with that film, but it was a financial blunder. After that, they made Gunbuster. After that, they made Nadia, The Secret of Blue Water. And for 4 years, they did nothing. This Hideaki Anno was the one that was supposed to be leading their studio, making animated works. It was mostly the success of his Daikon 4 animation direction for the Japanese science fiction convention that led to them becoming a actual business and making animated films. For those 4 years, the only thing that was keeping that business open was merchandising and their software division. So during that time, he fell into certain periods of depression and uselessness. And at some point, he made Evangelion. And when you actually sit down and start looking into Evangelion, it's this weird hodgepodge of everything that's already been done in mecha anime and other similar anime. It's very interesting like that. It's like The Matrix. When you sit down and break down The Matrix, there's really nothing original in that movie. But it's creative in the way that it took all those elements and put them together into a cohesive whole. Is it cohesive in Evangelion? Generally, yes. But he also said Evangelion is like a puzzle, you know. Any person can see and give his or her own answer. In other words, we're offering viewers to think by themselves so that each person can imagine his or her own world. In this instance, he's speaking specifically about comprehending the show. But I think him saying that Evangelion is like a puzzle is also interesting when you actually try to break down the show and its creative influences. But it doesn't help that the show, from the very start, is one of duality. Right down to the title of the show. Its actual title is Shinseki Evangelion, which roughly translates to Gospel of the New Century. But its English title is Neon Genesis Evangelion, which is more like Gospel of the New Genesis or Gospel of the New Creation. And this goes into other things like the titles of episodes. There's 2 titles to every episode. There's multiple terminology for things. So there's like 2 levels to pretty much everything in the show, from concepts to titles. If they were going to make both the English and the Japanese title the same thing, they probably would have said Soseiki, Shin Soseiki Evangelion. Soseiki being the word that's more along the lines of Genesis. But Seiki is more like century. Again, multiple terminology. The word they use to refer to the angels in the show is Shito, which translates to apostles. The word that they would use for angels is Tenshi. Now, this gets interesting when you start to think about, okay, well, apostles. There's 12 apostles. But they actually use angels in English text. They use angels on all the monitors, all the displays. The original concept for Evangelion was to have 12 apostles. If you read the manga, you'll know that there's 12 angels in the manga. So, one of the cool things that actually is in some of the Japanese books, they actually released the whole original design and production document that lays out the synopses for the episodes, the original designs. And somewhere in the middle of the show, the original plots of the show and the final plots of the show changed dramatically. For instance, in the original plots of the show, the original designs, the original synopses for the episodes, the original designs. And somewhere in the middle of the show, the original plots of the show and the final plots of the show changed dramatically. For instance, in the original plots of the show and the final plots of the show Kaoru was supposed to be introduced to the show much earlier than he actually was. So, here's one of the angels, Zeruel. I don't know which number he is. I think he's like 14th or something like that. Wait a minute. Okay, well, hopefully this will work right. Okay, so in the show, this angel is the 14th. In the manga, it's the 9th. In the new movies, it's the 10th. So we're getting these weird multiple numbering systems for things. It's not configured to show me my notes. Oh, well, I'll just try to do this from memory. So these are some of the original designs from the show. And these are done by Yoshiki Sadamoto, who's the character designer and also the manga artist, and I guess manga author as well. And he did all of these in watercolor. And they're very, very interesting. They're pretty close to the mark for what it ended up being, but some of them are kind of cool, like the exposed spinal column, that one. It started out being much more bulky. So, common knowledge, there's a lot of German in the show. Nerve, Seele, Soul, Gehirn, Mind, Eva, Eve. I think one of the most substantial ways that they use named terminology is there's a lot of things from naval vessels in Evangelion. Most of the character names come from various naval vessels, mostly from the World War II era. The Aoba, the Ikagi, the Ayanami, etc. There's a few that are coming from American. For instance, Illustrious was one of Mari's names. Is I guess HMS that would be British, which would make sense. One of the ones in the middle is Musashi. Musashi was a character in Girlfriend of Steel. So that's where a lot of the names in the show come from. One of the major influences of Evangelion is 2001: A Space Odyssey. Some of these are kind of superficial. The ship from the beginning of the movie, the cockpit or the interior of the ship is very similar, or is reused in Evangelion. There's the actual ship itself. It's a little bit different, but it's along the same lines. Now, this one's a little subjective, but there's a very similar reliance on their computers and their AI in 2001, and the same thing that you see in Evangelion with the Magi. I like this one. You can see there's like these little valves on the top of the spacesuits in 2001, and there's these like sort of eye kind of things that are on top of this angel in particular that looks fairly much like a direct reference. Some similar compositions in the way the moon and the earth are shown in both the movie in 2001 and in Evangelion. When what's his name goes flying through space and time, there's this kind of water coming at at the camera that is very, very similar to the water shown in the beginning of the opening animation for Evangelion. Octahedrons show up in one section 2001, and again you see them in Evangelion. This framing is very similar. The image on the bottom is from one of the trailers for Death and Rebirth. And everybody probably knows this. The monolith factors into both 2001 and Evangelion. Now, if you're kind of loosely familiar with 2001 Space Odyssey, you may not really be aware of what the monolith actually is. They're referred to as sentinels, if I'm correct. And they kind of serve two main functions in the world of 2001 and 2010, etc. The sentinels basically bring intelligence and life to various planets. A similar idea exists in Evangelion with the seeds, Adam, Lilith. They're seeds of a alien civilization which is referred to as the first ancestral race. It's not very well documented in the show itself, but a lot of the secondary sources, things like the classified information that's in the Evangelion 2 video game, help to detail and explain the role of the seeds, like Adam and Lilith, and the lances, and explaining that they are these seeds of life that get sent out throughout the universe to seed the universe of life. So, within the show, humans, Avas, angels, Adam, Lilith, they're all fundamentally the same beings from the same civilization. They're all humans. Alright, so obviously you've already seen Evangelion. Who here has seen Nadia and the Secret of Blue Water? Only a few of you. Now, I don't want to spoil too much because Nadia is a really, really good show. If you've also seen Gunbuster, I watched Evangelion and then Gunbuster, and then years later watched Nadia. Nadia was made between Gunbuster and Evangelion, and it shows. It's very, very obvious because Nadia has lots of stuff from Gunbuster and lots of stuff from Evangelion, or the other way around, depending on how you're looking at it. One of the most notable examples of this is where Shinji's character design comes from. Yeah, you basically just, get rid of the girly eyelashes and shorten the hair and make him a boy, and then you got Shinji. Nadia was also kind of a prototype for all three main characters. Like Nadia, Shinji is a little bit of an emo kid, indecisive, and there's one point where Nadia kind of breaks down and has like this major emo fit that's very, very similar to Shinji Ikari. She also has moments of these really, really, bitchy Asuka moments. There's this point where, the team is, foraging for food, and they kill a deer. And they come back and they toss the deer on the ground, and look at this deer we got. She just loses it. And, one of the lines she delivers is almost verbatim the same line that Asuka uses later, where she's like, I hate myself, I hate everyone, I hate everything. Very, very similar. And of course, like Rey, Nadia is a vegetarian and sort of the key to understanding a lot of the things that are going on in the science fiction plots of these shows. But there's a lot of things that are very similar. This is probably the most spoilerish one that I'm going to show you. But there's this scene in Nadia, like in Evangelion, where you basically come into this space, this woman is already there. She takes out a gun, and she threatens to shoot her subordinate and kill him. The scene was almost shot by shot the same thing that is used later on in the end of Evangelion. Plays out a little bit differently, the motivations are different, but very, very similar. There's other similarities in animation. There's a scene where Nadia does a somersault backflip, or corkscrew backflip kind of thing, and lands on this railing in the exact same way that Rey lands when she drops out of the vent. Now, the thing that makes Nadia special is this gem that she carries called the Blue Water. And I don't want to tell you too much about this because it's pretty much the main meat of this show, the properties of this blue water. But I can tell you that it's very, very similar to that angel. And there's some animation that's very obviously been reused. There's other designs in the show that appear on different outfits, like the hats that the villains wear have the same kind of designs that show up on certain angels. The naval characters wear the same outfits that the naval characters in Evangelion wear. There's this little 3-point design that shows up on some of the robots that also shows up on some of the angels. Lots and lots of similarities between these two shows. It's one that I highly recommend looking into if you like Evangelion and want to learn more about Evangelion's creative process.